through the season, and if you follow the show, like way back when, I always talked about getting to this point, like Panthers fans, getting to this point where we didn't have to hear about the Panthers not having their first round pick, which turned into the first overall pick. And I'll say things have been relatively quiet in the media, at least. I know there's probably Bears fans still out there rubbing it in our faces and numerous other outlets that are just bashing the Panthers, which is fine. But getting to this point, at least from a fan perspective, I'm glad it's here and I'm glad it'll be over. And really looking forward to the mini camp, the OTAs, everything that is going to come along with that. Now, one of the things I talked about in the podcast that I recorded, but I like to bring it up because it was kind of a semi-significant thing, is Austin Corbett moving to center. Now, again, that's was his position when he was drafted, again, out of Cleveland. And to move back, coming off of injuries, he's battled injuries in back-to-back years. And so Dave Canales and Dan Morgan were asked about the potential of drafting a center. And there are guys that are going to be there. And I think from the Panthers' perspective, they're not worried. One, they feel like it's a great opportunity for Austin. Like, hey, this is your chance, man. You can come in, you can be the leader, you can, take control of the offensive line and prove that you are the person that can do this job. He's also in the final year of his contract. But on the back end, what they've talked about is Dave Canales and Dan Morgan putting pressure on the guys that are here. You don't want to remain stagnant. Don't want to, stay in the same state that you're in right now. So bringing in some of these younger guys and rookies, they're going to come in and they're going to have that fire. He even said, like, they're you got the guys in front of you. They're going to be sitting there, looking up as far as being more alert and like, oh man, I got to take my crap seriously. There's this guy right behind me that's going to be competing for my position. I mean, where I sit, when you think about the needs for this team, I do like where I'm at is you're not going to be able to solve everything this year. You're not going to solve every single need in the draft. That's just the nature of the draft. I mean, if you come out here and you bat 1,000, that's great. But the odds of us batting 1,000 are, batting 1,000 is like, you've got a starter or at least a player that can contribute to the team like day one or possibly in year two. It's hard to imagine that the Panthers are going to get that with where things are right now. So for me, I try to weigh like, well, what if we roll the dice with what we have today? And I know it's a gamble. That's why I say you have to make this decision, and this is what the Panthers are going to have to decide. Well, would we be better suited in the future if we go ahead and address wide receiver and potentially edge or cornerback, that small group? Throw out whatever group you want and punt one of these needs down the road. Now, when I say punt, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to go back and draft that position, but the odds of hitting on that late round pick to turn into the guy that you want, the dog that keeps getting emphasized, I think it's hard to imagine that. So if I'm the Panthers, it comes back to this continued concept of best player available for the team, trying to find that best player, but it's not forcing the best player that is available. So yeah, if you're sitting there at pick 39, and again, I know boards are going to look different. We saw what happened last year with the trade up for DJ Johnson. So on our board, he had to be much higher, at least in Fitter's mind and some of the folks, to make a decision to move up and trade. So even for us, like as we analyze our boards and we look at whatever website you want to look at and say like, oh yeah, this person's ranked here, internally, the scouts, the team, they're going to have different views. We can only hope that they just figure it out and hit on some of these picks. Putting your chips, Marco says, putting all your chips in Corbett is foolish, in my opinion. That knee is basically grounded me. That's rough. That's rough, man. No, good. I agree, though. It's a good point. I know I kind of sided off of like, hey, can we wait a year? It's kind of me just pushing out the debt further. I think if you have a Frazier, if you have Jackson Powers, like there's no doubt that you take him if he's available, or if one of those guys is available. It's a the other side of that is like kind of to your point, one with just his health, contract, all that. If you do have that star making center that potentially falls, whoever it is on your board or the Panthers board, you're talking about solidifying the offensive interior for at least, I mean, you could stretch it, but I'd say at least 3 to 4 years, assuming health across the line. And I mean interior because you have Lewis, you bring in potentially this rookie center, and then Hunt on the opposite side. It's a pretty stout interior to have to help with your rookie quarterback who's getting adjusted to the league and coming into year two, adding all these weapons around him. You want him to be upright. You really want to see who he can be with an offensive line and with weapons. So, yeah, I mean, in the way the Panthers are talking, it's like, hey, we want pressure. We want guys competing. I don't think they would hand Austin the job like out of the gate. I know we're kind of talking, focusing on center. I'm just like wondering what is going to happen on like the depth behind our starters this year because there's quite a bit like on the under contract on the team. There's a lot of guys last year, even Zavala, some of the rookies that were undrafted, Jensen that are going to be there. You even throw in Cade Mays. You have Brady Christensen now in the rotation. We brought in Yash again as a free agent. So looking at like the second line and behind that, and I just was not where I was planning to go. But when they talk about having people here to compete for roles and positions, you think back to the Yash signing, who is the swing tackle. Like, is he going to give Icky a run for his money? Because this is a situation, and we've kind of seen this playing out so far with Dan and Dave. You know, they talked about not having ties to players. Like they don't have ties to this player or that player. And you're in that position now. Like I understand contract wise where Icky is, and it's hard to imagine him being gone. But it reminds me of back just normal, back not normal, but like high school football or whatever youth sport football where I don't know if anybody ever heard of daddy ball, where you always had the coach's son. Didn't matter how good or bad he was, the coach's son was always going to play. And you could sit back there sometimes like, why the heck is this dude out there? Like he is complete garbage. And it kind of, I felt like that shelter was here for some of the players before. And I mean, it makes sense. Like they've been around, but now I feel like that's ripped off. And it's like, oh, the coach's son, the dad that was running the team, he got fired. He's no longer here. You bring in new staff, and hey, I don't have any ties to any of you folks. I'm going to put out the best players for this team, the 11 best players on the roster, right? On each side of the ball. So it's fun news, man. Let me hop back over. Sorry, catching up on comments because I have the screen set up a little bit differently. Marcus says, I like Van Prawn the best. He fits the zone blocking scheme better, but if we miss out on one of the top three centers, I wouldn't mind the guy from Arkansas. Yeah, I talked about Bo out of Arkansas. Speaking of centers, I don't know if I can share. Well, I got to pull up my notes. I was looking at centers. So I always have these ideas. Of course, I always have ideas. I have ideas that sometimes pan out, sometimes don't. One of those ideas was creating this mock draft board for centers. And I was like, oh, I'm going to create a board for all the centers. And then I'm going to create one for wide receivers. And yeah. Well, I at least made centers. So let me share this. Give me 1 second. I'm just gonna share the plain old. I make all my stuff in Canva. I don't really care. To see. Yeah, I had this is like the now Graham Barton. I think he'll be gone. He is technically interior, guard, but there's talks that he could play. And this is kind of the pipe dream that these guys would be there. But Graham, Jackson Powers, like the odds of both of these guys really being there, I would be shocked. Like, hey, sports betting's legal in North Carolina. I'm not making any bets, but I would be very surprised if either of these guys fell into the second round. You do get into the other group that's on here, Zach Frazier, who I think is even his stock's kind of climbing up. Is it Skylar Callahan, who covers the Panthers, I think the Hornets, and West Virginia. But I heard him on WFNZ this week talking about Zach Frazier. It was a clip, and Zach Frazier's stock going up. So Zach Frazier on the rise. Will he even be around? So I think it's the dilemma that the Panthers are going to have with all these picks is like, who do you decide? Cedric Van Pran, the guy out of Georgia, definitely an option. Bo Limmer out of Arkansas that we were talking about, or you brought up there. I mean, these are rough projections. Like, I don't necessarily know if these guys would even fall or be available, or some of them may. But there was a guy, and I think his name is Arkansas Kane on X. If you're following and watching the show, let me know. I follow him on there, but I put this out, I guess, 2 weeks ago, and he's like, "Oh, I don't know why the stock is going up on Bo. Like, I can't stand him. Not good." So I don't know. Anyways, then you have a few other guys like further down, Tanner Bortolini out of Wisconsin. Delmar Glaze is a Charlotte native,